I believe we can start for the purpose of colleagues who are recording. Welcome to the press conference scheduled by the European Federation of Journalists, the expert group for media legislation. The topic of this press conference is the Charter on Journalists' Working Conditions. That has been in the works for the past 2 years, and that is aimed to help the journalists in regulating this sphere in the region and in Turkey as an integral part of Europe that has large issues in the field of media. I'm a member of Larik Group. I have been a journalist for 35 years, and I will provide you assistance should you need assistance. I will present our guests to you. We have Renata de Gensch from the German Union. We have Mariana Camovic, the president of the Montenegrin Union of Journalists, Tamara Chausidis from Macedonia, Rainer Reichert, the president of this expert group, and Mr. Mehmet Koksal, the project manager of the European Federation of Journalists. At the beginning, I will give the floor to Mr. Rainer Reichert, and I would like to mention this entire expert group of the European Federation of Journalists is a part of the largest journalist member organization. Rainer, you may take the floor. Good day, and I'm happy I'm in Belgrade.
Hope I pronounced this correctly. Unfortunately, this is all I can say in Serbian language, but we have excellent interpreters here, haven't we? As I understood. So, as a German journalist and chair of this labor rights expert group for the European Federation of Journalists, I will continue in English, a different language, to talk about one profession that unites us all, and that is journalism. This profession is currently under attack everywhere in the world and in many ways. Disinformation or fake news are emerging as a major threat to destroy the trust-based relationship between journalists and the public. Internet platforms run by Google, Amazon, Facebook or Apple are using our works to make money and exploit our author rights. Authoritarian governments are putting journalists in jail or feeding hatred against media professionals working for the public's right to access information. At the same point, we need to hear also the journalists' voices and to rebuild trust between our community and the public opinion. To positively contribute to this issue, we are presenting you today in Belgrade this new Charter on Journalists' Working Conditions with only 10 articles. This charter contains guidelines that are actually already existing in your national legislation at various levels. We are willing to share this document with you today as a last reminder to urgently implement these measures to protect journalists' working conditions. Colleagues, journalism is not a profession designed to support interest-driven messages and certainly not to spread wrong information. Journalism is a public good and a vital instrument to maintain the international and European standards and further developments of our democracies. We believe in these principles, and we believe in the values of the European Union, and also we believe that the place of Serbia should be inside the EU, if the country fulfills these criteria. I'm talking about core values like the freedom of speech and the freedom of press. Both are deeply problematic today in Serbia, as reported by the European Commission. Based on this background, the European Federation of Journalists and its labor rights expert group have developed a guideline in the framework of a UNESCO and EU-funded project entitled Building Trust in Media in Southeast Europe and Turkey, which we are presenting to the public today at this international press conference. This charter, signed by EFJ affiliates in Belgrade, will then be handed to the European Commission in Brussels and to the Council of Europe in Strasbourg. We hope that this might become a benchmark in their assessment exercises on media freedom, and that this message is heard by countries who do not meet these standards, especially those who are seeking EU membership. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reiner. Would anyone like to mention anything? Ms. Renate from the German Union, which is one of the largest unions.
Yes, hello, dear colleagues. My name is Renate Gensch. I'm member of the National Council of German Journalist Union. It's a part of Verdi, the greatest union in Germany, with nearly 2 million members. We are nearly 40,000 journalists who are organized in newspapers, magazines, or broadcasting, or online and digital platforms. So, and for us, it's also very important that we can make support to all of you and to all of the new candidates of getting in the EU to get good working conditions and to make the levels better than now. So this is one of the part, and also against harassment and discrimination of journalists. We also have in Germany that nationalists and right-wing parties are working against journalists and making violence or in Facebook and wherever. So it must be important to look at our 10 articles that included that. So thank you.
I would like to give the floor to Mr. Mehmet Koksal, who is the main manager of this project before the European Federation of Journalists. I forgot to mention that I am the representative of the Union of Journalists of Serbia in this expert group, in which we try to find the most practical solutions to help the journalists in various situations. Mehmet will tell you something more about the charter.
Thank you very much, Dejan. For the charter, I just want to first of all thank the cartoonist Dujan Petricic, who made those drawings that you see on the screens to illustrate the articles that we are presenting you today. So mainly we have focused on the freedom of association, because in many companies or structures, journalists are not free to create their own representative structure inside the company to defend their social right. The second article is maybe self-explanatory, is the right to have a written contract. Why? Because we have seen that in many countries people are working on a verbal agreement and they are not paid for their work. So when you have a written contract, you can better protect and defend your rights in front of a court. The third article is the right to collective bargaining, is getting together and start collective bargaining process with the management of the company. The fourth article is non-discrimination in employment. Actually, we have seen that in many places journalists from different backgrounds are discriminated, but some of them are also discriminated because of their union activism. So when they try to recruit new members to the union or to their organization, they are sometimes fired or moved from their position to a lower level position. This is something that we also are fighting against. The fifth article, you will like it a lot, it's the right to rest and to disconnect. It's something quite new in France. So what this article says actually is after your working hours, you can still receive emails, etc., but you are no more forced to reply to these emails. You are no more, as an employer, as a worker, you can say, sorry, but this is my time to share with my family, to do anything for my health and security and safety. I do not have to work after the working hours. Because, as you know, with the emergence of all the social platforms, Twitter, Facebook, anything, journalists are constantly requested to follow, do, report, retweet, or follow up all the requests from the management. So with this article, we say, stop, there is a working hours. We can still receive it, but we are not forced or punished because we did not react it on time to a specific article. To a specific request from the management. The sixth article is about the ethical standard and good governance, and here I remember we have been doing a lot of work with the Ethical Journalism Network in Serbia, visiting many news organizations and promoting what they call the 5 points to attack hatred inside the newsroom. So actually it's trying to encourage all the colleagues not to use words or wordings that are attacking, offending, or pushing and promoting hate inside their media organization. So when they are using specific words to attack people, we are saying that it's against the ethical standard of the profession. The eighth article is about safety and protection. All journalists have the right to have access to trainings before going to report on hostile environments. We have seen that many photographers actually are sent to hostile zone, war zone, without having proper protection. The next article is about the right to refuse to sign a content when you don't agree with the title that has been published or changed by the management, because a lot of journalists are writing articles, but their articles are edited by the editor-in-chief, and so the journalist is prosecuted afterwards. And so we say that when you feel and you see that the content of a production or media production is not in line with your ideas, you can refuse to put your name on this article. This is also an important part. And the next article is about the right to protect journalistic sources. It's to protect actually the relationship between journalists and the older sources that are feeding the journalist's work, like whistleblowers. People are saying something in an anonymous way, so journalists cannot be forced to reveal their sources in these cases. And the last article is request decent working conditions, which should be normal, but we know that it's not normal in our newsroom. This is why we put the 10th article to defend actually and to put pressure on the employers to offer decent working conditions for people who are working for the public right to have access to information. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mehmet.
Mariana Canovic, the president of the Montenegrin Union of Journalists, will say a few words about the aim of the charter. Mariana, you may take the floor. Good day for me as well. As you know, from what Mehmet presented, you've recognized probably the problems with which you face on a daily basis. And this was the name of this charter, to enumerate all the burning questions in the countries of the region, in the countries of the Western Balkans, that is, and Turkey. What is happening in Serbia is also happening in Macedonia, Montenegro, Kosovo, Turkey, and all the other encompassed countries. These are bad working conditions, and the purpose of this charter is to remind the employers of their obligations that stem from the Labor Act and other laws that adhere to, that are pursuant to from the media laws, etc. 14 news organizations, unions have signed this charter. The point of this charter was to have as many many unions, as many employers, as many newsrooms signed this charter. We would like to, of course, reduce the level of censorship and auto-censorship, to increase the level of working conditions, to have journalists work in better conditions and to work in dignity and have dignified conditions to work in. The end aim of this charter, or aim of this, and the aim of the Federation is that during 2019, this charter will be submitted to the European Commission and to the and to the Council of Europe. This charter would be a reference value, one of the indicators when measuring the level of media freedom in our countries as candidate countries for EU membership, as well as in countries that are already members of the EU. These are some of the values that I believe are universal, something that is quite close to Western European countries, and we're still supposed to develop this culture. It would be good if the European Commission and the Council of Europe would believe this to be a valuable instrument and use this instrument to measure how far away or how close we are to the membership of the EU. So that's it in this introductory part. If there are any questions, you may ask questions. When mentioning international organizations, Serbia in 2018 received a worse mark, a worse grading than previous years from Freedom House. From category free media, we moved to the worst category, partially free media, and this is one of the steps to try and rectify this situation, this problem, or at least to help us return to the values Mariana mentioned and my other colleagues mentioned. Everything that we've mentioned, we wanted to make a practical guide for values that already exist in media laws and in the Journalist Association of Serbia and Independent Journalist Association of Serbia codes of conduct. Many of the things we are not applying in journalism yet. I would like to now give the floor to my colleague Tamara from the Macedonian Union. Of course, what Dan mentioned is very important. Many of the things in the Charter already exist in the statutes of various journalist associations and unions. They're also a part of the law, the labor laws and media laws. You have to have a written contract, for example, between your employer and yourself, but in practice that's not so. In media, many of the journalists are employed illegally without any written trace. They also work informally as contracted journalists. I believe your Labor Act and our Labor Act are similar, so these informal types of employment and contractual work is problematic. All in all, journalists working under such conditions do not have the freedom to do their work and do the work in the interest of the public, but they have to do what the editor-in-chief or their management says them to do or tells them to do. So without free and critical media, no country can be considered democratic. And all interlocutors here today have emphasized this. The idea of this working group is to remind everyone that there is no democratization and Europeization of a country without adherence to these basic rules that are set out in this charter. I believe, and I would like to encourage my colleagues to take copies of this charter. Charter is available in Serbian language. It's also available online. Use this charter. Spread the word about the charter to your colleagues. We have a lot of young colleagues who are entering the journalist profession and are not aware of their rights and their freedoms and their obligations. Thank you. Any other guests would like to add something, or should we open the floor to our fellow colleagues sitting before us? a part of our team already has to leave to the airport, so should you have questions, please do pose them now. On the table here you have copies of the Charter in English and in Serbian. The Union of Journalists of Serbia will translate this abridged, digested version very soon, and you'll have it as a pocket edition. Dragana Čabarkapa, the president of the Union of Journalists of Serbia. I would like to inform our guests of the state of affairs regarding journalism in Serbia. In 2014, the law on public information provision was adopted. The aim of the law was to improve the situation, but it did not yield adequate results. About 300 of our colleagues were left without work. Numerous media were shut down, and other media remained open through project co-financing, and they were bribed via state money. In these media, the unions were the first ones to go. 1,380 media was registered before the law was passed, and now we have 2,500 media outlets. We have a lot of internet media. We're currently conducting a research study on internet media, and we can say that the current state of affairs with regards to journalists is very difficult. Each media has about 2 employees working with or without a contract, and the salary is about 250 euros, which is lower than in Montenegro, if I'm right. We commend what you've proposed. It's very important. What's most important for us now is a binding document, a collective agreement that exists in all countries of the Western Europe, I believe. The Union of Journalists has a representative in the working group for the development of the media strategy of Serbia. We've insisted on establishing social dialogue in Serbia, on having a journalist collective agreement, and also allow for this contract to be applied to all colleagues, both media workers, media professionals, and journalists, such as the case in the European Federation of Journalists. This document has been published on the website of our government since January 31st. You can check it out, and now we are having the public debate on this media strategy. What is most important for Serbia now is to have a binding collective agreement. Anyone wants to comment? Mehmet, maybe?
I think Dragana very quickly summarized the state of the Serbian media with the failed privatization process. We say it failed because it was not done the way that the European Union was willing actually to conduct this process. I think one of the biggest failure is not to have access to media ownership, and that the privatization process has actually given the floor to a media that is more captured by the people in power, instead of having a pluralistic media and a pluralistic approach to access to information. We have a more centralized message, more centralized structure that is actually giving all the time the same information to the same public, and this is a really problematic issue that well, the solution actually is should come from the Serbian people itself. I mean, it's not the European Union or any other country that should say to Serbia what they should do, but there are principles and rules that are accepted and applying to any type of situation. And for the moment, this media strategy that is being discussed should be revived. It's not working, so they should do something to revive this dialogue and to solve the problem.
Sveta from the Independent Journalists Association of Serbia. I would like to greet our dear colleagues, and I would like to thank them for this charter. As Dragana stated, I believe this is a very important step in order to try and regulate certain relations and the position of journalists. Unfortunately, Dan already said so. That some of the articles are already in our codes of conduct. Some of the articles from the Charter are part of our legislation, and some of the articles we remember from previous times, from past times. We, as older journalists, remember how journalists were treated previously. What's most worrying regarding journalists is their level of salaries, their level of income, as well as that journalists now live in physical insecurity. Freedom of speech is in danger here. We have an issue with political will or lack thereof, because there are pressures on journalists, there are pressures on media outlets. Those media outlets who are critical of the government, and the pressure comes from the highest level of government. We also have the issue that our judiciary is not working as it should be working, as it would be normal to work. Journalists are protected. The associations and unions are trying to do their best, but if you have a system which does not function every step of the way, this system which is waiting to ambush you at every single corner, you have issues not only with the material status of journalists, but with the actual point of journalists' work. I agree with what my colleague Sveta said. All three members of the European Federation, the Independent Journalists Association, the Journalists Association, and the Union of Journalists were in agreement over all the issues, including the material status of journalists, their freedoms, etc. Now we have this broader public debate about the media strategy. What's important is for us to maintain to remain in solidarity, to work towards issues jointly, and also to work on our common goals, goals that we all can agree on. I hope we will manage to fight together. With regard to the collective agreement, of course, has to be one of the binding articles. We also need to have a binding code of conduct that would be pursued by the print council. Of course, the respect to the code of conduct would be a part of the collective agreement. So this is the only way. Only having binding documents, only having binding collective agreements, binding codes of conduct is something that we can work with. And of course, our solidarity and these binding documents would make the employers respect our rights. Thank you, Dragana. I would like to ask other colleagues to ask questions if they have any. I will mention again that we have certain airport obligations of our experts, so our colleagues from abroad might have to leave us at some point. This charter, this document is an attempt of the media community in the region and here in Serbia to try to improve the situation, starting from our own yard. We have to start from our own yard to see whether we respect journalists, whether we respect the provisions pursuant to us, whether we are going to still allow false reporting, whether we're going to allow an editor-in-chief to call a falsified report free speech. If an editor-in-chief says that free speech is reporting fake news, is reporting untruths, then we have to start from the beginning. We need to start with ourselves, see where we're at, and then move forward. Anyone else here would like to say something more? If not, I would like to thank you. Please do take the copies of the Charter, both in English and in Serbian. In the days to come, we will also translate this pocket-sized, Charter. So thank you for coming. Thank you for attending this